Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Tuesday, May the 12th. In the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC, I'd like to start by thanking the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show. So I'll start off with Elizabeth May. Elizabeth May is all over the media. Everyone is aghast, they say. And here's the Times columnist. They're not the worst, but here's the Times columnist today, Tuesday, May the 12th. And the headline says, May apologizes for her off-color speech. And of course, the media is all over her on this one. It's big news. It's probably international news. Now, I picked this up, it's from Elizabeth May. This is the spring newsletter that she sends out to all her constituents. It's all about Bill C-51. It's all about Bill C-51. And funny, none of this was told to us by the corporate media. But something happens at a press gallery fun night. And you know, Walter, it struck me as I was walking over here, I wonder if this is one of the first acts of the new Bill C-51, because now we've created a secret police force who can target people who are opposed to corporate Canada. And when Elizabeth May goes after Bill C-51, she becomes an enemy. And would it be impossible for somebody to slip a little something into her drink and then make a big thing out of it in all of the corporate-owned media as if it was really important, when all the important issues that Elizabeth May talks about, and all of us try to talk about, don't really get a lot of coverage in that same media?
I mean, I didn't have a chance to read. I haven't read that much, you know, words in the Times columnist ever. Like there was the first page, the second page, and the editorial page. I didn't read any of it. Apparently she dropped the F-bomb, Jack.
Oh, my God. Can you imagine how horrified the media must be about that?
Could you imagine how many times some off-color language occurred at the press gallery dinner?
Yeah.
You know, really? Is that a story? So it's really too bad.
Here's one thing Elizabeth May said in the newsletter she sent out, and it's a list of some of the people who say that, who are opposed to Bill C-51. And it's funny that this also never really got promoted in the media. Joe Clark stood against Bill C-51, Jean Chrétien, John Turner, and Paul Martin all stood against Bill C-51. We the public were never told this by our media. Former Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, Louise Arbour, Michel Bastarache, Ian Binney, Claire Dubé, and John Major, 5 former justices on the Supreme Court of Canada, were never told this by our media. Legal experts from the University of Ottawa Law School, University of Toronto Law School, and they even say some media stood against it, although I must have missed that. So the media betrays us, they fail us, and then they manipulate us by going after Elizabeth May.
Yeah, the coverage is something like, you know, the bombing plot on the legislature lawn. It's about that quality of coverage. They just latch onto something that might look.
And people believe it, and I don't blame people. You know, they're very
effective. You know, but I tell you, Jack, Elizabeth's doing great work. She's putting out that paper, which is great. She's covering it herself. It's too bad the federal NDP hasn't really gone to bat. Although it opposes Bill C-51, it doesn't appear that they've really made much of that. And also their opposition to what's happening in the Eastern Mediterranean, Syria, and Iraq. You know, the NDP aren't really vociferous, you know, about that. So it's too bad. And they're leaving lots of very fertile political ground wide open for Elizabeth May to come in. I think the NDP could get a terrible shock in the next election if they're walking in thinking that they're going to pull off another Alberta style election and just get coronated. It's not the same. Politics are not the same federally. You have to earn your vote. And when Elizabeth really comes out that clear on those issues, she's representing Canadians. And most Canadian values really are reflected in her views, and I think the Greens could really take off if the NDP don't wise up.
Well, you know, she's taken a hit from the corporate media this week and the people who run the country. It's up to us. You know, we've got to build the democracy that I think all of us want, and part of that is building the media that we all want, because we sure don't have anything. For example, I got the numbers from Alberta. So NDP sweep, you know, it's a tornado, big change. The NDP got 41% of the vote and won 54 of, I think, 87 seats. So 41% of the vote, and they got a substantial majority. Wild Rose got 24% of the vote, got 21 seats. And the Progressive Conservatives actually got more votes than Wild Rose. They got 28% compared to 24. And they won 10 seats compared to 21. So what happened was the voting system that we use in Canada did not give the people of Alberta the government they elected. They voted for something very different. What they got was the manipulation of a very poor voting system that we have because the people who run the country like it. It works well for them. The NDP would not be in power if they destroyed Alison Redford to start with over nothing, and then you know, Jim Prentice took the fall, and now the NDP comes in. I don't think that can happen without.
Well, there's been so much manipulation in Alberta politics, and is that a surprise? Look at it out here. Look how wacky our politics are. Try to figure it out. I've been here for 30 years and still I can't figure it out. So, but in Alberta, you know, you get that case where the numbers are terrible. Oh, by the way, you know, the NDP could bring in proportional representation in Alberta.
Right.
That is the platform of the federal party. I think they've mentioned it here in British Columbia.
Yes. It's the policy here too.
Is it? That surprised me. But now there's a chance. This is exactly a good chance. Let the public have a fair government.
Yep. So once again, the people of Alberta voted for basically a coalition government, and it could have been NDP PC, it could have been PC Wild Rose, it could have been anything, and you know, but they didn't vote for an NDP majority government. That's what they got, and it's a big problem for the country because our voting system doesn't give us what we vote for. Have you got a topic, or you want me to carry on?
No, I'll just follow what you're doing so well.
Yeah. Omar Khadr, Harper was on television, newspaper, radio. And basically, I don't know if I've got his exact words, but Mr. Harper said of Omar Khadr that we know that he pled guilty to serious crimes, including murder. And Mr. Harper was all over the media saying this, and the media presented this as if it were true. They allowed Mr. Harper to make the statement over and over again. And it divides Canadians because a lot of people believe he did plead guilty to these crimes and murder. And in fact, he did plead guilty. But what they don't tell you is the story. And the story is that Omar Khadr was told that, and I believe I have the facts right, I may be off by a year or so, but he was told that if he pled guilty, he would get 8 years and he would be sent to Canada. And if he didn't plead guilty, he would spend the rest of his life in Guantanamo, and when Guantanamo shuts down, he'd be sent to some prison in the States, and he'd never get out of prison. So that was the deal. And for Mr. Harper and the media to tell us that Omar Khadr pled guilty to these crimes without telling us the truth is just an example of why our country is just doing so many wrong things, because we're being lied to from the top constantly.
You know, you get lied to so much that you get desensitized about when they lie to you. Like I heard that too. I didn't, you know, it kind of ruffled me a bit. But when you really start to dissect it, you realize there's an agenda here. I mean, somebody's writing all the lines, Jack, for all those guys. You know, they have an agenda, and it's so clear that, you know, what threat is this particular person to Canadian society? He was taken to, was it in Syria that the event happened?
No, it was in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan.
But imagine a soldier being arrested and thrown in prison
Yeah.
a soldier arrested and thrown in prison for shooting or injuring or killing somebody else in a war. I mean, has that ever happened? How can the Americans do it?
It's so strange, and the whole thing is so odd. But look at Harper. Look at this new anti-terror thing they're on. It's a total fabrication. We know it. It's just a total. George Orwell, I don't know what he would be doing backflips in his grave. He would never have thought how far they would have taken this. So, it's nothing new about these guys. Fortunately, Cotter has been released.
Yeah, for him.
So,
that's great.
and I think this is so important. There's a chance for him to have a life, and I really wish him the best because he's gone through a lot.
And I was talking to a friend just a day or two ago who didn't know that Bill C-51 had passed. He's interested. He kind of follows what's happening in the country, but they've kept it so well hidden that probably a lot of people don't know that Bill C-51 was passed. It passed, I think, last Wednesday. A sad day for Canada, I think. And basically, we moved on.
I think it's a watershed moment. I really believe that legislation is going to totally dismantle. Well, of course, they probably know this. Harper and that regime probably know that's the end, and this is their last bit of legislation. They're going to disappear. It rubs so many people the wrong way. Every political party. How are they going to survive this one, Jack? I think this is the thing that people really start to look at and really start to question and wonder, how do we get this far into this whole terrorist scare in Canada and all these fake bombings and all this stuff? Most people look at that and, there's something wrong.
No, I think a lot of people don't think anything's wrong. A lot of people believe, for example, the 9/11 official story. I don't believe the official 9/11 story. It started with that. We moved on into a war on Iraq, which a murderous terrorist war carried out by an imperialist bunch of insane lunatics who run the United States. But, I mean, does anybody on TV ever say that? And now, out of all of that comes ISIS. I mean, you can see the creation of ISIS if you look at what they actually did. And they've taken us here in order to create the fear to allow for Bill C-51. And Bill C-51 is there to protect the corporations. It's not there to protect us.
Yeah, maybe I'm being a little too hopeful. But, what is going to happen to wake people up is the question. I mean, this is a pretty big deal.
We need a media. We need a media that can take them on, their own manipulative, lying, pathetic, because they're good at what they do. I mean, I believed the media when I grew up. I certainly believed every bit of it.
Harper spent a couple $100 million on this war in Syria and Iraq now. It's a lot of money. Where does he get the mandate to do that, Jack? Like, our people really were clamoring to send troops, and he had to respond to the public outcry?
That's a very good question. How does our dictator do these things? And he does them because he has this full support of the people who run the country, and they own the media.
Yeah, so there he was in Syria or someplace recently, snuck in the country and got up within 100 kilometers of the
he was in Iraq.
Iraq. The thing is that, is that what we want our leader to be doing? There's a huge catastrophe in Nepal, and now there's been another earthquake today. Shouldn't our government be spending time on real emergencies, on real humanitarian aid, and, kind of get out of the killing business in some war that nobody, there's no need for them to be there at all?
Yeah, they're taking us down very dangerous roads based on lies. What you said about the story of the Harper government's ties to the girls that were smuggled from London to join ISIS in Syria. I mean, there's a direct connection to Stephen Harper and the Canadian government, but nobody will report it.
I know, it's so shocking. when I first read it, I checked it as much as I could, that story, and it held up. It was reported in the mainstream media. Harper's right-hand man, Bruno Sacamani, who became his ambassador to Jordan, was running a smuggling ring through Syria into through Turkey into Syria. I mean, it's a pretty direct line here. This would take a government down, you know, in midterm.
But in Canada, nobody even knows. Nobody's told.
That's really wild. But they're not talking about it.
Here's something else that they're not talking about, the genetic contamination of our entire food supply. But in Vermont, the state of Vermont passed a law saying that they were going to start to label genetically contaminated foods beginning July of next summer, so July 2016. They were sued by Monsanto, I guess, and all the corporate food business in the United States. They've withstood the first challenge, so a court ruled that they can proceed. I assume Monsanto and the boys will take this to the Supreme Court of America if they can. And nothing in the media. Like, we're not told because they don't want us knowing that there is a place in the United States that is standing up and saying we want genetically engineered foods labeled. We're not allowed to be told that. And once again, it's the media.
Yeah, there was a case in Quebec about 10 years ago about the cosmetic use of pesticides. And the small city in Quebec, Hudson, Quebec, they were sued by Monsanto, and they won. And they won the right for all municipalities across this country to regulate the use of cosmetic pesticides. And we didn't have that until they took that case on. It cost a couple $1 million. The Sierra Legal Defense Fund took it on and went to the Supreme Court. So, I mean, good things can happen, even at municipal levels, you know, and that's the important thing for people to remember, that the laws are written in certain ways, but there's always, you know, a good, keen legal mind can interpret them in a way that's favorable for the public.
Yeah, in that case, too, I mean, we should have, we should have congratulated ourselves hugely for taking on the chemical industry and beating them in Hudson, Quebec. But instead, we were never told. You know, the law sort of came into being. They deny us our victories. And until we have our own media, they'll continue to deny us our victories. We won't even know about them. I just want to read this about the pharmaceutical boys. You know, vaccinations, trust us, we're good. Believe the pharmaceutical industry when they tell you that vaccinations are safe and effective. I don't think they are, but at least we should see the proof, which they don't tell us. And all of their other drugs. I mean, and plus their control of the entire Canadian medical system. The Canadian medical system, I think, is controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. I saw this a few months ago, and I actually read it once before, but I just want to read it again. Fritz Termeer, found guilty of slavery and mass murder at Auschwitz. He was found guilty, I guess, by the Nuremberg trials. Served only 7 years in prison, and when released, became chairman of the board of Bayer, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. So that's what we're up against. I mean, these guys are tough.
Other than that, he's a pretty good guy, Jack. You know, torturer, what the heck, you know.
I'm going to have to dig deeper into the pile.
Well, I could bring something up
Okay,
slightly associated with pharmaceutical thing. Adrian Dix was talking last week in the legislature about the case with the fired workers that were doing the research on the smoking cessation drugs, and right when they were just about ready to release those studies, the Christy Clark regime shut them down and said they were using private information inappropriately and stuff like that, and shut down their study.
So this was the 7 people who were fired?
They were all fired. All eventually were settled out of court except for one party, I think. So they was all trumped up. It was all a big fat lie. But Adrian Dick spent 2 hours in the legislature, apparently, raking over those coals. But he never brought up the research. Nobody really knows why Christy Clark and these guys attacked them. And they were doing research on smoking cessation. And the thing is about these big companies is they hate to see a bad report, Jack, anywhere in the world. And I think that's what happened here. The Liberals helped out their buddies by shutting down that study, and we're probably never going to see any of that research.
And just before I came, there was a guest on CFAX. I was listening to CFAX talking about essentially poverty in Victoria and how Christy Clark and her buddies are making it so difficult, even for people who are entitled to welfare and some support. It's getting more and more difficult for them to even access it. It's all computer and telephone, wait half an hour, and it's another attack on the poor. Take from the poor, give to the rich. I mean, that's Christy Clark, and that's our province.
Yeah, I mean, people are disadvantaged when they need these sort of services. They're not on their game a lot of the time. And they have to have the brains of a lawyer to get to fill out the forms to be eligible for the benefits. So a bit of a catch-22 there.
It was the Together Against Poverty Society, and they just said their office was being inundated with people who can't get through the system anymore. We've got to do better. We can do better. We need media. We need democracy. Thank you, Walter.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
And thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.